Okay, evening everybody. So let's get started with the do now here. Okay, this is something that we've been practicing for quite a few days now, and you are trying to find the length of AC, right? So we've seen these diagrams over and over again where we have two triangles, a big triangle, right, or the original one, and then that line that creates the second triangle, or the smaller triangle. And you want to separate it, okay, the best you can. Orient them the same way as I'm doing here, and try to set up a proportion. So the key to a problem like this is finding the length of AB. And it's not a lot of work to figure out that AB, do a little addition here, 21 and 9, that's 30. So now that I know that, I can put my X in the diagram over here, where AC is, and I can set up a proportion. Now there's a bunch of proportions you can set up, as we've been discussing for several days now, but you do something as simple as 30 over 9, because those two to go together, and then X over 3. As long as your proportion has the cross products of 9x and 90, then you have a good proportion. At this point you divide, and we see that X is 10, and X is actually representing AC, so I don't have to do any further work. AC has a length of 10. Alright, so what we're going to be doing today is similar to what we have been doing, except now we're going to be looking at a diagram that actually has three triangles, not two, but three triangles. So certainly going to be a little bit more difficult. And this is a very popular diagram. You'll see it at every Regents exam. It's basically a right triangle, okay? So here's the original right triangle. And what happened is this altitude is drawn to the hypotenuse. So the altitude that's drawn into the hypotenuse, right? That's this line right here. Remember, you've probably heard altitude before. Altitude is another fancy way of saying height. And when we drop down that altitude, what happens is we end up, remember, altitude is always going to end up being perpendicular to the base that it's drawn to, in this case the hypotenuse. And when it's drawn in here, it ends up creating two more right triangles for a total of three right triangles. And what's interesting about these right triangles is that all three of them are similar to each other, which means again that the angles are the same and that the sides are going to be proportional. Okay, so we end up creating three right triangles here. Triangle BCA is similar to triangle CDA, the medium one, and similar to the small one, triangle BDC. So one strategy you can employ when we start putting numbers into the diagram is what we've been doing, is separating the triangles and redrawing them. However, you have three triangles instead of two. Okay, so it's definitely a bit more work. Now you want to redraw them so that they're all oriented the same exact way as they are here. Okay, all three triangles have been separated and drawn in the same exact way. Now I gave you a couple hints on how to do that if you're a visual learner and you want to try redrawing them. First, start off by making the right angle in the bottom left-hand corner. And you can see that done for all three of these diagrams. They're all right angles, bottom left. Second thing you want to do is put the long leg, okay, on the bottom. So the long leg, remember a right triangle has two legs and a hypotenuse, so the long leg, you want to put that long leg for each triangle on the bottom. Okay, and that's what's done here for all three of these triangles. That's the long leg of each triangle. And lastly, put the short leg going up or vertical. So the short leg of each triangle should be going up vertical like this. Oops, I kind of blackened that out there, but it should be going just like this. Let's erase that so you can still see the letter. Okay, and so if you're a visual learner and you want to keep continuing to redraw, it's a good strategy. It'll certainly work. It just takes a little bit of practice getting all these triangles drawn so that they're oriented the same exact way. But what I want to focus on in today's lesson is more of this chart that I've come up with. And over the past few years, we've had a lot of success with this chart. So I want to give it another go around. As you can see on the left side, we have the three triangles, the small, the medium, and the large triangle. And then above that, the three categories, or the three sides, the small leg, the large leg, and the hypotenuse. So what I'm going to go over is with how you take each triangle, and then what we're going to do is just fill in the letters for the side. Eventually we're going to have numbers, but for now we're just going to write the letters that represent each side for each triangle. So here's the small triangle, triangle DGF, okay? And so we're going to put down the small leg of that triangle, and hopefully you can see from the diagram that that side is FG. Then the large leg, not the largest side, but the largest leg, okay, would be FD. And then the hypotenuse of that green triangle would be DG. Okay, now, one thing I do want to point out, as I'm putting in those letters, if I reverse the letters, for example, the small leg, if I put GF, it's the same thing as writing FG. And the large leg, if I put DF, same thing as FD. If the hypotenuse, I put GD, it's the same thing as DG, okay? The two letters, the order that you write the letters is not important. All right, so now moving on to the medium triangle, so we'll do that one here in blue. Okay. And again, you always, right, that altitude is dropping down this right angle here, so they're all right triangles. So the small leg, that's from F to D. The large leg, not the largest side, okay, that's FE of that blue triangle. And then the hypotenuse is DE. And now we'll move on to the large triangle, okay, that's this big one here in red, okay, triangle GDE. So now I want the small leg. Well, looking at that, that's going to be DG. The large leg, that's going to be DE. And then the hypotenuse, okay, so remember the right angle is up there at D for that triangle, so the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, and that's going to be GE, the hypotenuse, for the red triangle. And that's what I want you guys to focus on for this assignment here, is trying to fill out this chart with the small leg, the large leg, and the hypotenuse for all three triangles. All right, let's try that again. All right, so you can see that the diagram itself can be oriented anyway, so this one sort of looks like it's been rotated or flipped over a little bit, right? But we're going to fill out the chart just like we did before, starting with the small triangle, which I'll outline here in green. Okay. And you can see the right angle being formed by the altitude here. Okay, so the small leg, well, hopefully you guys can see that that is ER. Again, you can write RE, doesn't matter. The large leg, EF. And then the hypotenuse for that triangle is RF or FR, however you want to write it. Moving on to the medium triangle. And it should be obvious which triangle is the small one and which one is the large one and the medium one. Okay, there's the right angle there. Again, where that altitude FE hits the hypotenuse. So the medium triangle, the small leg, that's going to be EF. The large leg, that's going to be ED. Remember, it's the large leg, not the largest side, but the largest leg. And the hypotenuse, that's going to be FD. And finally, the big triangle, okay. Okay, the right angle, we see it's there at F. So the small leg, RF. The long leg, FD. And finally, the hypotenuse, RD. All right. So this takes a little bit of practice. If you don't get it on the first shot, you know, don't beat yourself up. We'll be working on this for a couple days. Eventually, we'll start throwing in the numbers. And as always, if you have any questions, shoot me a message. All right, guys, take care.